There's a growing crisis in the way we provide care to those who need it, and it's once again making headlines in Canada. Take this story, for instance. Reporters have recently gotten their hands on a Government of Ontario report into care sector staffing shortages that the government tried to keep under wraps. The report outlines a concerning trend. The province is currently short tens of thousands of personal support workers, and by 2032, that number is expected to exceed 50,000. And that's on top of an expected nursing shortage of 30,000 by the same year. As to the reason why the government tried to keep these numbers under wrap, we actually don't have to speculate. The government justified its secrecy by arguing that releasing these numbers would harm the province's financial interests because unions would use the numbers to argue for higher wages. In light of all we know about the personal support worker shortage, anti-labor sentiments like this can only be read as counterproductive. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, let me run you through some of the history on the subject. In Ontario, the origins of the current problems facing the care sector are generally attributed to a policy shift that happened in the mid-90s. See, up until that point, care services were mostly provided by nonprofits like the Victorian Order of Nurses or the Red Cross, who maintained long-term relationships with the government. But in 1996, the Progressive Conservatives under Mike Harris latched onto a new model that treated the care sector primarily as a fiscal tool to offload responsibility from public health institutions, rather than just as a community service. In this new model, which was dubbed managed competition, the province implemented a comparative bidding process that brought more and more for-profit care providers into the space. Within short order, workers were faced with increasingly precarious working situations, with unregulated care aides beginning to shoulder expanded responsibilities in order to keep costs as low as possible, all while being subjected to more casualized forms of work, which is characterized by things like low wages, low employment security, and unreliable schedules.
When the competitive bidding started to happen, they fell behind the rates of pay in the hospital. And then it became that they were actually starting to give up some of their benefits. They were giving up some of their mileage or having reductions, no pay increases, etc. But when those nurses actually had to move to a private agency, then what they gave up became more severe. They gave up full-time jobs and benefits to become casual workers. So they gave up their job security and their benefits. That's critical.
Now, various provincial governments have attempted to remedy the situation, but as of today, there's little to show for it. This was made strikingly clear in 2020 when the Ontario Health Coalition released its report on the PSW shortage, in which it stated bluntly that conditions have deteriorated and are at a breaking point. After having surveyed more than 350 people from across the province who are all involved in the care sector, they reached a consensus that staffing shortages have become an epidemic in the care sector. As a consequence, the workers' time and efforts are spread thin across a growing number of patients, which of course has led to a deteriorating quality of care. But despite this unmet demand for this essential service that these workers provide, wages were found to remain close to the provincial minimum, which unsurprisingly has led many PSWs to decide to transfer into other lines of work, while too few new recruits fill the vacancies. Those who do remain are faced with increasingly strenuous hours and conditions, which are not only a problem for the workers. See, these conditions make it impossible to adequately satisfy everyone's care needs, which leads to unsafe conditions for both the workers and the care recipients alike. And I really want to emphasize here that this is care work. This is work that absolutely needs to happen, and it can be incredibly rewarding, which indeed was one of the points that the Ontario Health Coalition wanted to highlight in its report, is that this work is filled with beautiful moments. But those moments right now are being overshadowed by a system that is failing both those who provide care and those who receive it. And to be clear, this is a trend that you can see beyond Ontario and even beyond Canada. Variations do of course exist depending on where you look, but in general, an aging population has produced a high demand for care services, while poor working conditions have produced a low supply of care. Evidently, an adequately high quality of care cannot be maintained if poor working conditions are pushing workers out of the industry. It doesn't work. So, what can be done about all this? Well, there's never going to be a single silver bullet solution to a problem on this scale, but there is good reason to believe that a shift in workplace organizational structure can remedy many of the problems that are being faced right now in the care sector, both on the worker side and on the client side. Specifically, I'm talking about worker cooperatives. If you're not familiar with the worker cooperative model, it is worth noting that these organizations can take a variety of forms in practice, but in general, they're characterized by two main principles: worker member ownership and democratic member control. By worker member ownership, I mean quite literally the people that work at the cooperative also own the cooperative. There's no distinction between owner and worker, hence the term worker member instead of employee. By democratic member control, I mean that instead of key strategic decisions being made by company shareholders, they're made by the workers themselves on a one-member, one-vote system. And these 2 points carry with them some pretty dramatic implications. For starters, worker member ownership turns the workplace into a genuinely collaborative project between the members. Contrast this with the traditional firm. If workers are employed by a business owner, there's always going to be an inherent tension between the interests of the workers and the interests of the boss. If the boss wants to make money, and they have to in order for the business to survive, they're incentivized to maximize productivity while minimizing costs. In real terms, this means that employers are compelled by the demands of the market to keep wages as low as possible while making sure that their workers are producing as efficiently and quickly as possible. With this dynamic alone, we can start to imagine why the traditional wage-labor relationship tends to not produce outcomes that are in the interest of the workers themselves. And we can especially start to imagine why this logic of efficiency doesn't really have a place when we're trying to provide essential care services. If we're trying to do things like meet human needs and cultivate strong relationships, the worker cooperative model fits quite a bit better. See, in a worker cooperative, the interests of the workers and the interests of the cooperative are one and the same. And because the cooperatives are controlled by the workers, they tend not to make decisions that are going to jeopardize those workers. So going one step further, if the workers' interests are embedded in their communities, then the cooperatives come to see their own interests as inseparable from that of the community that they're in. So instead of the adversarial tension inherent to the wage-labor relationship, workers, their workplace, and their community can all operate in alignment with their common wants and their common needs. And for our purposes, those common needs are high-quality work and high-quality care, which are things that we all share in common as human beings. Now at this point, I imagine one of two thoughts may be crossing your mind. The first, do these things actually work? And to that, the answer is actually pretty unambiguous. Yes, they do work. Worker cooperatives aren't even some radical new idea. They've been around for the better part of 2 centuries, and they've been used by workers around the world to fulfill all sorts of different wants and needs. Certainly they can fail, just like any other business, but if they're managed responsibly by the workers, then they have in many cases been tremendously successful. If you want to know more about how they work in Canada, the CWCF website is a great resource. Now, if you're already familiar with worker cooperatives, I imagine the other thought you may be having is that there seems to be a really clear fit here between cooperatives and the care sector. And you're right. The largest worker cooperative in the United States is in fact a Homecare cooperative that was founded in the Bronx in 1975. As of 2017, it was providing work to over 2,000 home care workers, and it was generating a revenue of over $40 million US. And it's not even just home care where you find this. Childcare, which sees many of the same problems as the ones we've discussed here, has also proven to be an area where the worker co-op model can better satisfy both community needs and worker needs. But beyond the United States, this turn towards care cooperatives is in fact part of a global trend, which was highlighted in a 2016 report from the International Labor Organization, where they found people around the world embracing the cooperative model as private and public institutions have struggled to keep up with the needs of an aging global population. But bringing us back to our local problems here in Canada, one of the really cool things about worker cooperatives is that you can make one right now without having to wait on high-level policy or political change that feels way out of our control. And I don't just mean this as a theoretical point either. Right now, in Ontario, where I'm recording this from, there's a very promising project playing out in the cooperative care space. Homecare Worker Cooperative, based in Peterborough, was founded in 2021 by 3 personal support workers who were fed up with the poor conditions of work and care that they were confronted with daily. Rather than seeing the workers as an expense to be minimized, Homecare Worker Cooperative understands its members to be a value add for what they do. With this shift in logic, the cooperative offers better working conditions alongside worker empowerment to enable its members to provide proper standards of care and to encourage PSWs to remain in the care sector. And this approach has so far been a clear success, with its members reporting satisfaction with scheduling, sufficient time for client care, improved opportunities for training and education, and adequate pay. Beyond worker satisfaction, the cooperative model also enables the PSWs to act as voices for their elderly care clients, bringing care needs in line with the cooperative's decisions. Worker cooperatives clearly don't just hypothetically have potential in the care sector. They are actively proving that they are a very strong tool for addressing our community care needs. A few weeks before filming this, I caught up with Danielle Turpin, founder and managing director of Homecare Worker Cooperative, to discuss these achievements and perhaps more importantly to ask, where do we go from here?
So you're right. I think it was really about, PSWs needing to be valued and have a voice at the table, and we just don't in their work environment. But in regards to being, I don't know if I'm ever going to feel like what I set out to be is accomplished or completed, because I think with co-ops or with a need such as care sector and home care sector, I don't think it's ever done, right? It's a movement and it's a process. So the more I get involved in this, the more I realize that there's more to do. But my ultimate goal was to create a model that offers a meaningful workplace for PSWs, that gives them a voice, gives them fair pay and compensation and benefits. So in that regard, I've done that. So I'm happy with that. It's working and it's successful. But regarding the ultimate end goal, I don't think I'll ever really be done. Yeah.
There are, of course, challenges of building on the work that Danielle and her colleagues have done. For one, personal support workers are systemically overworked and underpaid, not to mention highly fragmented by the lack of regulations around what they do. Just take the various naming conventions as a case in point here. Personal support worker, care aide, nursing attendant, these all mean the same thing, and the list goes on. So, how do you convince a workforce whose resources are already spread so thin to take a chance on something new? Well, Danielle already has a solution in the works. It's called Cooperative Care Alliance, and it's a federated cooperative that helps other cooperatives who make up its membership to develop and succeed.
And the concept really is we wanted to provide care sector workers, whether that's PSWs, daycare, nurses, whatever in that area, to give them a supportive environment to actually get into entrepreneurship and do that. Not only that, that's the consulting and the articles of incorporation and that, but we want to maintain that support so we offer back office support such as payroll and bookkeeping for all of our members. We offer marketing, we offer HR support, hiring, we offer, they also offer seat at the board. Of course, we just had our board meeting today. We really answer to our members, and we want to be able to grow other home care sector co-ops. So, and we also have PSW members, but we have clients sitting at the table. And I think that's where the movement and then CCA can kind of grow in a larger stream, right? So it's not just the small local co-ops having the multi-stakeholder and having everyone's voice, which I think is difficult, right. But on a broader scale, I think that's essential.
And already the Cooperative Care Alliance is finding success on this front. There's a new co-op starting up in York Simcoe, and there's several other interested potential new members. But as Danielle made clear, they can't do everything on their own.
So at this point, it's really about, we can do it. Do we have the capacity? Do we have the support? And do we have the funding to continue doing this? So do I think it's a model that could be, I think it's a model that could be right side by side the traditional sector. For sure. It's already filling a gap.
Yep.
People are seeing it. So there's no reason why it couldn't be, we couldn't be included at the table with government getting funding in that regard. Yeah. I think it's just right now we need to be able to build it so people are aware what a co-op is. And
For what it's worth, we already have an example of a productive government cooperative relationship in the care sector right here in Canada. And if you're familiar at all with cooperatives in this country, it probably won't come as a shock that I'm talking about Quebec. See, here the government subsidizes social economy care organizations, which includes cooperatives alongside nonprofits. And the outcomes of this scheme are positive, with clear connections being made between workers and clients having their voices heard and the level of satisfaction with the care services provided. But for those of us outside of Quebec, and particularly in Ontario, there's still a great deal of learning that has to happen before we can really expect to see similar relationships pop up here.
Quebec is a very good model when it comes to that. But again, like, that's a very cultural thing as well, right? That has been embedded kind of in their culture forever. And this is a huge shift that we have to get in the Western side of things. So we're just behind.
So to recap, we have a crisis in one of the most essential parts of our communities. We have a potential solution to this crisis, alongside good evidence that this solution does work in practice. And we already have grassroots efforts in place to help the solution gain momentum. So what we're dealing with here isn't really a problem of feasibility at all. We know cooperative care organizations can work very well. We're dealing with a problem of education and awareness.
If we're wanting to create a home care movement and we're wanting to do that, we have to educate the people. We have to let them know that there's another alternative, and it's not just another employer. There's another pathway to PSW as a real genuine profession of choice. And that's not being told right now. So I would love to see, actually, I don't even love to see it. It needs to happen. We need to find a way to get into the colleges in this care sector if we actually want to grow this model. I don't think there's another option. There has to be a way to do that. So CCA has created educational materials, and we tried to partner with colleges. And a lot of it's really about, again, it's coming down to funding, and it's coming down to all of that. So I think that would be one of the biggest obstacles that any organization would have moving across, nationally or even provincially, is making sure that people know right from the get-go that there's an alternative.
As we've seen, the stakes in this crisis are very high. Our population continues to age, and we cannot hope to satisfy everyone's needs if we continue to organize our care sector around generic business principles like maximizing efficiency in the name of profits. Instead, we should be taking seriously the impulse that people have shown around the world to embrace the cooperative model as a better way of addressing our communal needs. I'm going to close here with a quote from the social work scholar Rebecca A. Matthew, who in turn was quoting the author John Rastakis. Cooperatives are enduring evidence of another way of living our lives that support reweaving the social fabric that has grown threadbare around us. Let us not drop the thread.